The news yesterday was shocking but not surprising. There was, by anyone's estimation, a coup which took place in Bolivia. Here's President Evo Morales at a press conference which he gave. You can actually watch the full press conference up on Ruptly. It's up on YouTube right now. President Evo Morales has resigned, and he's resigned apparently under duress, we're told, and he denounces a coup attempt, and he's urging the people mobilized on a constitutional basis, in other words, to exert their constitutional rights. His implication here is that this was a breach of constitutional regulations and rules with regard to the election, that he did win the election by a 10% margin, thus avoiding a runoff from his closest competitor, Carlos Mesa. So that's Evo Morales, and it's been quite ugly, actually, but it's something that we weren't actually surprised about. We ran this story a few days ago, early in the week. U.S. plotting new coup d'etat to oust Bolivian President Evo Morales. And I must say, when I posted this on social media, I was attacked by a number of troll accounts. It was absolutely incredible how fast they mobilized within the comment threads. And I have not seen anything as efficient as this, except for commenting on Saudi Arabian issues with regards to kind of online influencers, or you could call them trolls. So Evo Morales was warning that there was a coup in progress earlier in the week. And sure enough, it happened. So this, I think right now, we want to try to break down how the sort of steps that came into place before the events this weekend. So we're going to give you a little step-by-step guide to regime change and show you how it was done in this case. So this is our regime change guide to Bolivia. Step 1, US-backed social media influence campaigns. I just mentioned this before a minute ago. This was the first account was going to show is Free Hong Kong. Free Hong Kong. These are the accounts that are coming in to attack anybody supporting Evo Morales or anybody calling this a coup. These are the sort of accounts that are coming in, sort of people who have been campaigning for the Hong Kong riots, etc. So there's no surprise there, but we'll go a little further and it gets even more interesting. Here's another account, basically, that uses the Pepe meme, which is kind of strange. But here's step 2. This is Smart Power NGO activism, and this is Ken Roth, Human Rights Watch, an important step against the disturbing tendency of leaders with diminishing popularity to steal elections to secure a new term. So that's Ken Roth, and you can see his tweet here. Basically, he's saying that Evo Morales is blaming foreign powers, coups on regime change, etc., in order to sort of offset his diminishing popularity. This is according to Ken Roth. This is the head of Human Rights Watch. This is somebody who is pro-regime change, who's advocating for regime change in Syria actively, and he's meant to be the head of a human rights organization. So this is what you call smart power. This is NGOs running influence campaigns here. And so just to continue with this, to show you another aspect of this, this was a campaign run against Bolivia over this summer. And this is one of the articles from The Independent. The world believes the Amazon is in trouble because of Bolsonaro. No, instead they should look at Bolivia. So basically, this is the mainstream media running a PR campaign across multiple outlets, blaming Bolivia for the Amazon rainforest fires over the summer. And what people will say, what does this exactly mean? The Amazon is burning and everybody is looking to Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. They should be looking a little further south, says Harriet Marsden from The Independent here. And basically, a pan-Amazon organization has accused both Morales and Bolsonaro of environmental genocide. This is what the campaign is building up. Here you can see, and what it's going to culminate in is what we'll show you here. This was actually called out by this particular online media outlet, the Orinoco Tribune, and they're basically saying Western regime change operatives launch campaign to blame Bolivia's Evo Morales for Amazon fires. This is back in August. Okay. And look here. Well, what do you know? Extinction Rebellion is the organization that is an environmental organization, and they were organizing a Bolivian protest in August in front of the Bolivian embassy. And this was designed to demonize the country of Bolivia and its leadership, Evo Morales. So what was interesting about this is what you see in terms of splitting the left, splitting the anti-war movement or anti-imperialism movement. In this case, they're using the environmental issue to split any opposition to U.S. imperialism. So while this coup is taking place this last week, there wasn't a lot of pushback from international activists and anti-war activists, because a lot of them, especially those who support Extinction Rebellion, have already been conditioned to basically look badly on the government of Evo Morales. And similar influence campaigns have been done with Libya and Syria, using feminist outrage in Libya with the Viagra Gaddafi story, or the gay girl of Damascus in Syria, setting the LGBT community against the Syrian government and so forth, and basically more sympathetic towards regime change from Western progressives using political identity issues and progressive issues to split the anti-war left. So we're seeing this again. This is one of the reasons why there's very little political pushback from the so-called left in the West, is because of things just like what we're showing you here. So we continue on. Step 3, US-backed opposition movement. Well, this is always something that you need. This was in our article. This is by Stephen Lenman, a great writer, who posted this earlier in the week. Leaked audios mentioned contacts between GOP hardliners, Republican hardliners, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, as well as undemocratic Senator Bob Menendez, with Bolivian opposition leaders. So they also called for setting government buildings ablaze, organizing nationwide strikes, and other disruptive tactics right out of the CIA's playbook, including violent street protests. So that's the US-backed opposition there, the pro-democracy opposition. This is very similar to what we saw in Hong Kong. Arson, violent gangs of thugs attacking citizens, attacking anybody that's basically pushing back against what's going on in the street, sort of reactionary violence. And with the full backing of the US State Department and all the US organizations and, quote, pro-democracy organizations. But we go even further here. We can take this narrative just a bit further. And step 4, physical attacks on politicians. Well, this is quite disturbing. Here is one politician. They poured red paint over her. She's the mayor of a major city, and marched her through town barefoot, and basically kind of a Game of Thrones type,
it's very Game of Thrones,
type situation. Yeah. And notice all the people who are frog marching her through town. They're all wearing masks. So everybody is covered up their faces so they can't be seen. And they say that they're doing this to avoid persecution from the dictator Evo Morales. Well, it's hard to square that sort of accusation when you look at scenes like this. These are absolutely right-wing fascist mobs, using physical intimidation and physical violence against elected officials. Let's get a closer look here just so you can see. That is the mayor. Her name is Miss Guzman, and Patricia Guzman, and she was marched through the city by protesters, who the Western media are calling protesters, but really these are reactionary violent mobs who are getting the full backing from the United States. So step 5, buy off the police. Evo Morales warns of a coup as police across Bolivia mutiny and join, quote, protests. Now, mind you, if these protests were in the West, they would be calling these right-wing extremist mobs. But they're anti-government protesters because it seems that our media want to see a regime change of government. It certainly looks like that from the coverage. So the police effectively have been bought off here. I think over time we're probably going to see and learn more about what went into this coup. But right now, all the people who are in the, quote, opposition, who have now taken power, are in denial that there's any U.S. involvement. And the U.S. is saying, oh, we're not involved, yet the evidence shows something completely different. So, and step 6, this is the most important step to finalize any military coup here. Basically, Bolivia's hardline socialist president, according to the Daily Mail, resigns after the nation's military chief said he should leave office following fraud allegations that marred elections. That's not true. The fraud allegations did not mar elections. Elections went as scheduled. So paying off military leaders, this is the final step for regime change. So Morales resigns after General Williams Kaliman said military chiefs warned him he should go. And Kaliman went on national TV on Sunday, yesterday, and said Morales must go to restore peace and stability for the good of Bolivia. And so Morales claims to have won a fourth term, this is the Daily Mail here, claims to have won a fourth term last month that had triggered fraud allegations. And this is the most important thing here, and this is the part that people are missing. Kaliman stepped in within hours of Morales agreeing earlier in the day to hold new elections and also to invite the European Union and the Organization for American States to come to Bolivia to verify election results. As Morales did this, this is when the military stepped in. So the military clearly here, backed by the U.S., most likely paid off by the U.S., did not want to have an election runoff again. They moved in aggressively to shut it down, basically. So he clearly was threatened. According to him, he resigned under duress. Let's look at the statement by Morales. This is just afterwards at his press conference. My crime is to be indigenous, anti-imperialist, and socialist, but this doesn't end here, he says, the statement given after his forced resignation. He's the first indigenous president or leader of Bolivia, one of the first in South America, if you can believe that. He opposed U.S. intervention in Venezuela. I believe they did not recognize Israel or have diplomatic issues with Israel, as does Venezuela. He's also provided over the most economically stable period in the country's history and the most politically stable period, with economic growth averaging 4%. So he was a socialist, yes, but he was also doing a hybrid of neoliberal economics and social programs. So he wasn't strictly a socialist, just as Venezuela is not a socialist country. It's a rampant capitalist country with social programs. But he's being branded as a communist dictator, basically, by the opposition. But let's just remind people a little bit of history with regards to Bolivia. And these are the countries where the U.S. has attempted and successfully carried out coups of various descriptions here. Look, all of these countries, basically the whole of Central and South America, bar maybe a few. That's between 1948 and 2019. And Operation Condor was particularly brutal. The scars remain today. You can see the statistics here with regards to missing people. People have disappeared as U.S.-backed military or U.S.-backed fascist dictators have taken power after a successful coup d'etat. It's absolutely shocking. Chile, of course, stands out as one of the worst in this sort of tragedy. Of course, Argentina as well. The tragedy of the disappeared. And you have men like this, Oliver North, lauded as a hero in many circles in America, but of course, he was running CIA Contra cocaine for arms. Here he is, and under the Reagan administration. This is in Central America, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, those areas. So the history, the pedigree is there. It's undeniable for someone to say that the U.S. had no involvement in this coup in Bolivia, which has happened this week. It's really impossible to make that case. There was absolute U.S. involvement. It's obvious. It was open in some cases, and the evidence is there.
And yet, these free nations, the UK, the US, seem to be quite happy to deploy right-wing extreme fascists when they feel like regime change. I suppose you could say Ukraine is another example of that. And the media, they get absolute support from the media to push forward with this policy. It's somewhat hypocritical of the media to carry Remembrance Sunday stories on one hand and this on the other hand on the same page, effectively.
It is, and Ukraine's probably the most egregious example of that. This is basically a far-right neo-Nazi revival that's been backed and shepherded along in the Ukraine since 2013. and it's unarmed. There's a paramilitary element to it. So it's just a neo-Nazi movement, basically in Europe or on the fringe of Europe, with a paramilitary element to it, and with military backing from NATO member states. Real classic street fascism. This is what our governments have built. This is the genie that they've let out of the bottle, at least in Europe. And so what exactly are they doing in South America? The potential for reprisals and vengeance and violence, rounding up, quote, leftists. We're already seeing reports of this. So the retribution. So what's happened, I think, is if this was Morales' second term, he would probably be defiant. He'd be standing out on a balcony right now saying, you're going to have to drag me out. But because this is his fourth term, then I don't think the urgency is quite there. He's been caught by surprise. So has his supporters. They just assumed that the democratic result would hold and that they could sort of overcome U.S. or foreign intervention by democratic means. But that's not actually what happened. So this is an aggressive, violent, physical coup d'etat. And the U.S. is involved in backing all of these types of groups. Look at Hong Kong. I mean, those weren't peaceful democratic protesters at all. And the United States State Department, National Endowment for Democracy, they've been funding and backing these movements for years.